Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Newsroom. I'm your host, Umar Khalid. But today is the 6th of October 2021. These are the stories that will be under discussion during the course of this hour. We'll begin with the Pakistan Army's top brass that yesterday expressed the resolve to take the necessary measures to safeguard Pakistan's territorial integrity in the face of this propaganda that is being put forward maliciously by the Indian military. This was, of course, said in a message by the ISPR. The resolution was expressed during the 24th Corps Commanders Conference that was chaired by the Chief of the Army Staff, General Qamar Javed Bajwa Sahab at the GHQ. Also, Pakistan has raised alarms at the United Nations about a threat that has been posed by India's far-right Hindutva regime on Monday, and we've also talked about this, but we will try to see that in the whole perspective of how India is trying to malign Pakistan. Now, our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the international engagement as far as Afghanistan is concerned. What is the importance of all the important countries across the world to get together and help Afghanistan in this hour of need? Because as the United Nations has also indicated, and so has Pakistan, that Afghanistan is going through an economic crisis, a humanitarian crisis, and it is important and pertinent for the world body to help Pakistan. That is also something that our Prime Minister talked to while talking to Bill Gates today on the telephone, in which amongst other things the situation in Afghanistan was also highlighted. The British Prime Minister envoy has also met with the Taliban leaders in Afghanistan, and they have also discussed the situation in Afghanistan. Now the third story, ladies and gentlemen, is about the climate change and how it is affecting Pakistan. Now there's a report that is known as the State of Climate Services 2021 Water. This comes just weeks before the COP26, the UN Climate Change Conference that is going to be held. It states and puts forward a lot of very important facts and figures as far as the current state of affairs of the world's climate is concerned, especially the water, and how in the coming years water is going to be a scarcity unless and until we do not do the needful. And finally, we'll be talking about Umar Sharif, who passed away in Germany at the age of 66. Umar Sharif was somebody who we've all grown up with. He was a legend, he was a comedian, he was an actor, but he was also a humanitarian. He leaves behind a hospital for the needy in Karachi and also for the artist community. We will talk about this as our last story. Let's begin with our very first story, ladies and gentlemen, and that concerns the Army's top brass that, of course, got together and talked about the malicious Indian propaganda that is being put forward by the Indian military. To talk more about that and, of course, the continuous trend of Indian malicious propaganda, we've been joined by Ikramullah Bhatti Sahab. He's a defense analyst. Bhatti Sahab, thank you very much to have joined us. Sir, we've been talking about in the past with you as well, with other guests as well, about the Indian propaganda. Now, whether it be the media, whether it be the military, and whether it be the politicians, there is a certain state in which India has put itself into as far as maligning Pakistan directly and indirectly is concerned. How important is it also for us as Pakistanis that all our factions, as has been highlighted by the, of course, the Corps Commanders meeting at the GHQ, that they need to be one as far as handling this malicious propaganda is concerned?
Certainly, it's very important, and we have seen that after the takeover of Afghanistan by the Taliban, the Indians have started to feel left out, and they just want to come back into the picture, starting from the region and then, of course, pointing it out to the rest of the world. And they started off first with, of course, maligning Pakistan, that the success of the Taliban essentially happened as a result of Pakistan's support. They came out with some fake footages taken out of from video games, and
that was, of course, Ikramullah Bhatti Sahab who's talking to us. There is a certain technical glitch due to which we cannot continue talking to him, but of course as soon as he gets back we'll continue our conversation with him. The 244th Corps Commanders Conference was chaired by the Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa at the GHQ. Ikramullah Bhatti Sahab is back. Bhatti Sahab, you were saying?
Okay, as I said, that fortunately the world came alive to it, and besides several other media houses and several other channel, we found that one of the French channels ran a very comprehensive program highlighting this fake
Panjshir.
propaganda that Indians had come out with to malign Pakistan and, of course, to downplay the success of the Taliban and the support that they got from within their own, from among their own people. That is how they were able to move in and occupy almost the entire country without any resistance, either from the people or from the Afghan forces or their security network. So Indians, in an attempt to downplay this development, which is a very significant development in the region, they started to malign Pakistan and, of course, accuse Pakistan of interfering in Afghanistan's affairs and helping the Taliban succeed, and, of course, making the rest of the world, especially the Western world and the US, view this as a very serious action by the Pakistan's military, that they have intervened in Afghanistan and helped.
Now, Ikramullah, Bhatti Sahab, I'd like to combine what our Chief of the Army said with what Munir Akram Sahab said on Monday at the United Nations, where he also talked about the full spectrum deterrence to counter any potential Indian aggression. Is Pakistan's message loud and clear as far as India is concerned?
Yes, you see, it came out specifically in the context of the Indian nuclear anti-ballistic missiles being deployed in the Indian Ocean, and of course, which adds a new dimension to the ocean, and of course poses a threat to Pakistan. And it was very clear in the statement by Mr. Munir Akram that Pakistan will, of course, take its own measures, take its own steps in order to counter this threat and continue to maintain minimum credible deterrence against any aggression that our enemy can think of, so that they do not feel that it's a free run and they can continue to exercise hegemony in the region, just like they have been treating the rest of the countries like Nepal or Bangladesh or maybe Assam or Sri Lanka or Maldives. And they're expecting Pakistan to behave in the same manner. And while they might be saying that this has been deployed in order to, of course, ward off any threat from China, but the fact remains that nearly 70% of the Indian military network, military strength is deployed against Pakistan. So we have to keep our guard up. And, of course, the statement of Mr. Munir Akram amply clears that, amply conveys that. And for the Indians to know and register that any such development or any such movement on their part will not deter Pakistan in its maintenance of credible deterrence.
Now, Bhatti Sahab, let's come to the 244th Corps Commanders Conference and, of course, what our Chief of the Army Staff had to say, and the malicious propaganda by the Indian military. The meeting also resolved to take all the necessary measures to protect Pakistan's territorial integrity. Bhatti Sahab, what needs to be done now in the wake of all that is happening from the Indian side on all different spheres to malign Pakistan?
Essentially, I think the people of Pakistan must continue to understand and appreciate the new threat that has emerged after the fall of Afghanistan into the hands of Taliban. That Indians are now going to start reactivating their sleeper cells, which they had with the help of our secessionist elements, either from Balochistan or from among the TTP, and of course continue to create a serious threat in Pakistan from within. And of course it should be beside this, they will come up in the social media, they will come up in the diplomatic circles across the world, especially in the Western capitals. So Pakistanis both in Pakistan and overseas need to see this, need to be watchful, need to understand this, and of course, do not get carried away, do not get swayed by the Indian propaganda, and should be able to come up with a unified voice, with a unified stance against any such malicious attempt that the Indians would be undertaking from now on.
All right. Bhatti Sahab, also our Chief of the Army Staff said, and I quote, that this baseless propaganda reflects the frustration of the Indians and an attempt to divert attention from the internal contradictions, especially the gross human rights violations in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir. This is a very known diversion that India has, of course, used, not even in the present but also in the past. I've talked countless times also with you in the past about why the world is keeping their two eyes shut and of course not reacting anyway whatsoever in the manner that they should. But do you feel now the onus of responsibility lies on Pakistan and its friendly countries to respond in kind?
Certainly, because it is in Pakistan's foremost interest that we continue to anticipate, continue to preempt all such attempts by the Indians. And we have already seen that there was this disclosure from the EU Disinfo Lab as to how the Indians have been using social media and other media houses with almost 750 outlets across the world, which were essentially focused at creating a false image about Pakistan. And of course, they were able to even influence various organs of the United Nations. So this is something that Pakistan has in its hands to continue to play up to the rest of the world, that anything and everything that Indians say has to be taken with a pinch of salt. It will just not be true. And the recent incident of their claim of Pakistani involvement in the Panjshir Valley operations is again another reminder and proof to the rest of the world that the Indian propaganda is essentially false, and they're continuing to in their efforts to malign Pakistan for accusations which are absolutely unfounded and baseless. So this is something that Pakistan needs to continue to tell the world, because the rest of the world, we know, has certain interests associated with India.
But Bhatti, we have been conveying that to the world. We've conveyed it on more than one occasion. So recently, we have also sent a whole dossier that was presented to the media by 3 of our ministers about Indian involvement and how Indian brutalities are going on in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir, so on and so forth. So many other dossiers have happened. Our Prime Minister Imran Khan has talked to the United Nations General Assembly more than once about the Indian atrocities that are happening within India, and of course maligning Pakistan. We know that the world is not budging as it should, is not taking action as it should. Then who needs to take this action? What needs to be done?
Well, you see, as long as the interests of the West continue to exist, continue to prevail, it will be very difficult for them to take any notice and of course to take any action against the Indians, and which necessitates.
All right, Ikramullah, Bhatti Saab talking to us, again a little technical glitch. We were talking about the Indian malicious propaganda against Pakistan, whether it be through social media, whether it be through the EU Disinfo Lab, or whether it be all through the other mechanisms, or even through their military and their military mechanisms that have been going on, the deployment of conventional and non-conventional warfare that is happening in the region as well, that has been highlighted by Munir Akram Saab at the United Nations as well, points towards a very grave situation as far as the way India is maligning Pakistan directly, indirectly, and on different fora. Bhatti Saab, are you back online?
Yes, I am.
All right, finally. Bhatti Saab, we have of course seen that India is going forward as far as putting Pakistan in a bad light. I mean, I can cite countless examples. We've talked about the military, conventional and non-conventional weaponry that is being put in the region, and of course, as Munir Akram Saab has said, 70% of it is used against Pakistan. Then all the different deals that India is using also against Pakistan. Then the FATF, then the malicious propaganda against Pakistan, whether it be concerning Afghanistan, whether it be security of Pakistan, and so on and so forth. There is, of course, a limit to how much Pakistan or the Pakistani authorities can bear as far as the Indian propaganda is concerned. What is that litmus test for Pakistan?
Well, you see, as I said, that as long as the interests of the West, be they commercial, be they political, be they strategic, continue to lie with the Indians, this battle will continue. And of course, Pakistan now has the advantage of major regional players like China, like Russia, like Turkey, who will come to the rescue and support of Pakistan. And Pakistan continues to utilize those forums, especially SCO, or even go up to the UN off and on to point this out. And bearing in mind that this is going to be a continuous battle, because those interests are going to remain there, because
Of course.
the West and the Americans have chosen India to be their player in the region to continue to check or balance out or impede the growth and development of China as a superpower which can compete the US. So that interest is there, and as long as that is there, I think this is a struggle. This is a campaign that Pakistan will have to continue. And now, because of the changing world environment, Pakistan does have big players who are here to help Pakistan, and Pakistan will continue to need their support and continue to use that support so that this pressure is balanced out.
All right, thank you very much, Ikramullah Bhatti Saab, senior analyst and defense analyst, talking to us about the Indian malicious propaganda that is going on from the different circles against Pakistan, and that is something that was also highlighted during the 244th Corps Commanders meeting that was chaired by the Chief of the Army Staff, General Cover Javed Bajwa Saab. Now, let's go to our next story, ladies and gentlemen. Ikramullah Bhatti Saab talked about the changing world environment. Our next story concerns the changing world environment, but in another manner, that is climate change. Climate change is, of course, affecting the world, including Pakistan, that is one of the most vulnerable countries. Of late, there is a report that has come out, that is the State of Climate Services 2021, that comes just weeks before the COP26 meeting that is going to be held on climate change and held under the auspices of the United Nations. But of course, it points towards a lot of issues, especially concerning water scarcity. More in the following report.
Climate change depicts one of the most debilitating existential threats to humanity, which has rendered both developed and developing world vulnerable to destructive ramifications. The most blatant impact of climate change is water scarcity and drought, exacerbated by global warming and accelerated by massive carbon emissions, deforestation and greenhouse gases, leading to melting glaciers, rising sea levels, changing rain patterns, droughts, flooding and frequent heat waves. Raising the alarm regarding looming global threat, a new report from the UN's World Met Organization warned that more than 5 billion people could have difficulty accessing water in 2050. As the UN report urges the leaders to seize the initiative at the upcoming COP26 summit, while WMO chief Petteri Talas noted that we need to wake up to the looming water crisis. The State of Climate Services 2021 water report crystallized just weeks before ambitious UN Climate Change Conference COP26 to be held in Glasgow from the 31st of October to the 12th of November, hosted by the UK. Earlier, a UN report entitled Global Assessment Report on Disaster Risk Reduction, Special Report on Drought 2021, warned that drought is a hidden global crisis that risks becoming the next pandemic if countries do not take urgent action on water and land management and tackling the climate emergency. It's pertinent to mention here that at least 1.5 billion people have been directly affected by drought this century, and the economic cost of water scarcity has been estimated at $124 billion. Marmi Mizutori, the UN Secretary General Special Representative for Disaster Risk Reduction, cautioned that drought is on the verge of becoming the next pandemic and there is no vaccine to cure it.
Now, of course, climate change is something that is a reality, and that is going to become even more difficult in the years and the decades to come. And that is what has been highlighted continuously in the different meetings of the United Nations and of late in this report also on the State of Climate Services 2021. Water scarcity is something we might not comprehend being in big cities, but ask that from those who have to go for miles and miles in order to just get some water to meet their daily requirements. This water is going to be scarce and scarcer in the years to come. That is why the world needs to come as one and understand this need to work towards water security. And not only climate mitigation is important, but also climate adaptations are very important in order to conserve as much of water as possible, especially with this negative trend in weather patterns that are going to continue in the coming decades. We've seen that the summer seasons are extending for longer periods of time. There's less rain than there used to be, and the winter seasons are also quite for a shorter time as they used to be compared to the previous years. So it is pertinent to note that not only Pakistan, that has shown through its different initiatives such as the 10 billion tree tsunami and so many others, that Pakistan is trying to do its level best towards making its country a cleaner and greener Pakistan. Also, the other countries need to follow suit and try to understand the importance of climate change and water scarcity. And now let's come to our next segment, and that concerns Afghanistan and how Afghanistan is slowly and steadily going towards an economic and humanitarian crisis, especially when it comes to food scarcity. We were talking about climate change, water scarcity, but here there's a country that also is in need of food. People are just going through the days eating potatoes and small stuff, but their daily requirements are not being met with. More in the following report.
The post-US withdrawal Afghanistan is embroiled in myriad taxing internal and external challenges which continue to circumvent war-ravaged country's ability to attain stability. Among the most debilitating challenges, humanitarian crisis, question of recognition, and insurgent tendencies depict colossal obstacles. Sensing the gravity of situation, British Premier Boris Johnson's special envoy met Taliban leaders in Afghanistan to discuss the humanitarian crisis and ways to combat challenge of militancy. Simon Gatz, Johnson's High Representative for Afghanistan, met Taliban leaders to articulate ways regarding possible UK's assistance to address humanitarian challenges and possible incubation of terror groups. Ironically, the development materialized after a group of 22 Republican lawmakers introduced the bill in US Senate to seek imposition of sanctions on the Afghan Taliban. Pakistan has persistently advocated that Afghanistan stands at the crossroads. An engagement with new political reality of the country is imperative to combat explosion of challenges that might destabilize the entire region. During his UN General Assembly's annual high-level debate, Premier Imran Khan emphasized that a destabilized, chaotic Afghanistan will again become a safe haven for international terrorists and urged the world community that we must strengthen and stabilize the current government. Islamabad has vociferously pressed the international community to incentivize the Taliban to respect human rights, keep terrorists off their soil, and have an inclusive government, as it will be a win-win situation for everyone. In a telephonic conversation with Microsoft co-founder and billionaire philanthropist Bill Gates, Prime Minister Imran Khan urged to consider providing humanitarian assistance to poverty-stricken people in Afghanistan.
To talk more about this, we've been joined by Dr. Hussain Shaheed Soherwordi. He's a foreign affairs expert. Dr. Saab, thank you very much to have joined us. Dr. Saab, this crisis that Afghanistan is slowly going into was something that was predicted by Pakistan since quite some time, had been highlighted by Pakistan since quite some time. Is the world reacting like it should as far as helping Afghanistan is concerned?
Taliban, they have risen to the power. This question is quite in the circles. I think that this is the time that we realize who is the best in Afghanistan and who is the opposition of the Taliban. At the moment, we cannot see any number of parties at all in Afghanistan other than the Taliban. We don't, the answer that I'm trying to make here is that we don't have options. We are left with just one party that has won, as per their say, they have won the war after 20 years of long fight against United States, and they think that they are the legitimate rulers of the country. So in terms of the process, although that very important model of democracy is not followed in Afghanistan, they are at the moment the ones who are controlling power. One thing. Second thing, in Afghanistan, democracy was always lacking. It was always in limbo. It was not at all in true sense
a system of governance that the Afghans have maybe understood over the decades.
Once again, sorry, that's it.
I said maybe it is a system, democracy is a system of governance that the Afghans have not understood over the decades, or maybe it will take them some time to go through that transition.
I don't think so. They are ready for that. And the reason is that the basics of democracy are not fulfilled there in that country. Afghanistan, minus few metropolitan cities, is a very rural area. And education is not at all rampant. It's in a very shabby condition. And so is the case with poverty. We need to have very strong middle class in a country so that they may move for democracy. So in terms of the process, we are left with no option but to support this group of people who are in government at the moment, and through that strengthen democracy, democratic trends in the country. If we leave Taliban simply because they are Taliban, simply because in the past they had fought against United States, there have been numerous countries who fought against United States and its forces, and later on Americans, they accepted them diplomatically.
All right. Now, Dr. Saab, let's talk about the world and its reaction towards the Afghan Taliban. And I'd like to emphasize on the United States of America first. Let's talk about, despite that partial relief that has come from the US, we still see that there is a group of 22 senators that has put forward a bill that calls for sanctions on the Afghan Taliban and also indirectly on Pakistan. Now, how do you view a sanction such as these? Whether this bill is passed or not is another thing altogether, but I'm just talking of the mentality inside of the United States as far as the current governance in Afghanistan is concerned. Do they not realize the importance of the humanitarian aid, of the economic aid that needs to be given, of all the money that they have put a stop on as far as the aid to Afghanistan is concerned needs to be given to Afghanistan at the earliest so that they can survive in the next couple of months?
As far as this humanitarian aspect of policy is concerned, I believe in international relations, we don't have any such mantra. What we have is we define our interests in terms of such very juicy slogans like humanitarian and human rights and a basic democracy and kind of stuff. So I believe if Americans are not happy with the regime, in what happened with them in the last days, which especially after 15th of August till 30th of August, that has left a very bad taste in their mouth. And what they are doing at the moment, the policies, the way they are adopting towards Afghanistan, as well as you mentioned and as we are witnessing towards Pakistan, it is more vindictive than a policy. It is more reaction than an action. I think that sanity will prevail.
Won't this vindictiveness be at the cost of humanitarian aid to Afghanistan in the current situation in Afghanistan? Won't that cause a crisis in the coming days and weeks just because of this vindictiveness of the United States?
I think that I answered, but I have to rephrase that. This is what I'm saying, that humanitarian assistance, humanitarian disaster, all these things are slogans behind which is the most important thing, and that is the interest of that state and the intent of that state. If they think that at the moment they have to penalize Taliban because of whom last days of their exit was not something very tasteful for them, of course they are at last to do that. But the most important question is that this vindictive attitude, will that serve their interests, or it will be further harmful and detrimental to their long-term policies? That is something that they have to understand. They are in need of Pakistan. They are in need of this region's prosperity, failing which, again, in the past, what happened in 1980s and 90s, that episode will be repeated. So probably this is the time that they must take a peace of mind and think broadly, think more positively, so that something positive come out of it. If they are witnessing...
That is very important. Let's see if that happens. Let's come to the United Kingdom, Dr. Saab, and let's come to Simon Gass, who came to Afghanistan. Of course, he's Boris Johnson's High Representative for Afghanistan. He met with the Taliban leaders, including Mr. Muttaqi, Mr. Baradar, and Abdul Salam Hanafi. This was said by the Foreign Office as well, and they discussed the Afghan situation that is currently present there, the humanitarian crisis, and how to prevent Afghanistan from becoming an incubator for terrorism. isn't terrorism and economic and humanitarian issue kind of directly or indirectly related? If people are economically stable, if there's no humanitarian crisis, if they're getting food, they won't resort to such mechanisms. Do you agree or disagree?
I think that my answer is yes and no. And the reason is that the Taliban also have to see the circumstances in which they are finding themselves. If they are still trying to bring that colloquial style of governance that used to take place during gladiator time or 1400 years back, I think they are living in fool's paradise. They must understand that the system of governance changes from century to century, if I cannot say from year to year. And the current circumstances are no perfect sovereignty, but it is a shared sovereignty between the countries of the world. Every country can comment on another country's internal domestic policies. In terms of the process, if Taliban are adopting policies which are not acceptable to the Committee of Nations, of course, then they would be at a loser's end. So they need to understand what the world wants from them. World wants from them, as you just mentioned earlier in your question, humanitarian policies based on human rights, humanitarian assistance need, but at the same time, very much respect for the woman, inclusivity of all other factions. That would be the moment when the world will adopt a very positive attitude towards them, failing which Taliban have to face the music.
All right, now speaking of inclusivities, let's talk about Bamiyan as well, and how the reports are coming from there as how people are almost without food. All they have for food is potatoes, and that too is slowly and steadily getting scarce. What needs to be done now by the world body? Shouldn't the United Nations have a very urgent meeting as far as humanitarian or economic aid to Afghanistan is concerned, and then put all of these resolutions into action at the earliest before a huge crisis begins in Afghanistan?
I think we need to speak very pragmatically. Instead of United Nations taking some actions at world level, I believe they must come over here and take action at regional level. All neighboring countries have to cooperate. They have to coordinate for saving Afghanistan from starvation, hunger, and disease. World community is shutting its eyes, but I believe neighboring countries, they understand the dynamics of Afghanistan. Once it slips out of our hands, situation will be disastrous, and the primary actor that faces the music will be the neighboring countries, as has happened in the past in 1980s and 90s and even after 9/11. So I believe United Nations has to come over. They have to coordinate, of course, because neighboring countries have yet to recognize Taliban regime. They cannot play that active role. United Nations must come over and coordinate between neighboring countries so that this food security, at least, that could be provided to the people of Afghanistan.
That is so true, Dr. Soherwordi, but at the same time, how do you view the Pakistani efforts in order to apprise the world about what Afghanistan is going through? Whether it be all the talks that our Prime Minister has had with his counterparts, of what our Foreign Minister has had with his counterparts, of also this latest conversation that has been held between Bill Gates and our Premier as far as Afghanistan is concerned. Do you feel philanthropists and billionaires such as Bill Gates could also pitch in and bring in that necessary help at the earliest for a country such as Afghanistan?
Your question is reminding me the situation of 1979 when Pakistan had given refuge to the Afghan refugees, and even at that very time, world community was silent and they were ignorant of the importance and gravity of the situation. I believe right now same thing is being repeated. Pakistan is running from pillar to post to give realization to the world community that Taliban, Afghanistan under the Taliban, they are direly in need of support and assistance minus politics. And that is the reason that you see Pakistani leadership even is speaking with numerous leaders as well as philanthropists like Bill Gates. So I believe Pakistan has always tried its level's best to contain damages from a disaster taking place. World community comes over at the nick of time, which shows that Pakistani policies are quite far-sighted as compared to what they think about this region. So I believe the Prime Minister of Pakistan is doing the right job, but of course this shows his far-sightedness and short-sightedness of the world community, and I believe that very soon everybody will realize that.
What is, in your point of view, the consequence that could happen if the world body does not take action at the earliest? Do you feel we are seeing another Africa in Afghanistan?
Well, it really shudders me, but yes, I have to answer you very gently and very sincerely. Yeah, your answer to your question is yes, because Afghanistan has limited resources. It's a landlocked country. Everything has to pour in from outside. It has no access to the sea. In terms of the process, starvation, hunger, disease, all these such things will happen, and Afghanistan will be an island of Africa right here in Central Asia, South Asia, and Middle East, right in the middle of these regions. If that takes place, remember that whatever happens in Afghanistan never stays in Afghanistan. It has always a spillover effect. So neighboring countries will be the ultimate sufferers then.
All right. Well, let's hope it doesn't come to that. Let's hope the world realizes, and let's hope that it takes necessary action to alleviate Afghanistan of its humanitarian and economic crisis that it is engulfed with as we speak. Thank you very much, Dr. Hussain Shaheed Soherwordi Sahab, to have joined us and to have talked to us about this very important issue that is engulfing Afghanistan and also indirectly this entire region that includes Pakistan. And let's come now to our very last story. On a very sad note, we are going to end today's newsroom, and it is about the sad demise of Umar Sharif, the legendary comedian who passed away in Germany at the age of 66. Let's see more about his life and his works in the following report.
Omar Sharif was known world over to his fans as King of Comedy. He gained unparalleled popularity in the 1980s and 90s as a comedian, actor, director, producer, and stage artist. The actor started his career at 14 with stand-up comedy and worked in around 60 stage comedies and television shows.
बस स्टॉप पे किसी पूछे क्या टाइम हुआ है? तुम्हें टाइम बताने के लिए घड़ी बांधी है क्या? अबे क्या तेरे लिए घड़ी बांध के खड़ा यहाँ पे मैं? टाइम पूछने के लिए मैं अपनी वैगन का इंतजार कर रहा हूँ। एक तो मेरी वैगन नहीं आ रही, ऊपर से तू मुझे टपा रहा है, बार-बार टाइम पूछ रहा है। क्या मैं तुम्हारे लिए खड़ा यहाँ पे? मैं ये कितना बड़ा घंटा कर लगाऊँ ना, इसमें टाइम दे।
He also produced, directed, and acted in 2 big movies. He was so spontaneous in his humor, and at times the people would start laughing even before he would start cracking his jokes. He was born on 19th of April 1955. He started his career as a stage performer using the name Umar Sharif, but later renamed that to Umar Sharif. 2 of his popular comedy stage plays were Bakra Kiston Pe and Buddha Ghar Pe Hai. Sharif received national awards for Best Director and Best Actor in 1992 for Mr. 420. He received 10 Nigar Awards and remains the only actor to receive 4 Nigar Awards in a single year. He was also a recipient of Tamgha Imtiaz for his contributions as comedian, actor, and producer in the entertainment industry.
अब देखिए मैं आपको एक फैमिली से मिलाता हूँ जिन्हें मैं कहता हूँ बर्गर फैमिलीज। ये बर्गर फैमिलीज क्या है? ये बोलते में अपना स्टाइल होता है इनका। ये उर्दू बोलेंगे लगेगा अंग्रेजी बोल रहे हैं। अल्लाह, हम लोग कल गए थे ना शमीम की शादीज में। अल्लाह।
Pakistani celebrities mourn the death of legendary actor and comedian Umar Sharif. Major politicians, cricketers, social activists, and people from across the country mourn the death of a man who had entertained them all for decades. President Dr. Arif Alvi has also expressed deep grief over the demise of veteran comedian Umar Sharif. Prime Minister Imran Khan said he was saddened to learn of Sharif's passing. Taking to his Twitter account, he said that he had the good fortune of touring with the comedian to raise funds for Shaukat Khanum Memorial Hospital. He said he was one of our greatest entertainers and will be missed forever. People from
Of course, Umar Sharif is a legend who will always be remembered, and his work will always live on through all the recordings that will remain with us and with our future generations. He was also a great philanthropist, and he leaves behind a hospital not only for the needy where they can get their treatment for free, but also for the entertainment industry of Pakistan. So of course he will still be remembered for decades to come because of all of these efforts and of course his comedy. With that, we end today's newsroom. We'll see you inshallah tomorrow with new segments and stories. Till then, get yourselves vaccinated if you haven't and follow the SOPs. Allah Hafiz.